Hello and welcome. We're coming to you live from Amman in the run-up to the World Economic Forum on the Middle East to be held in Jordan starting on Friday. This week marks the 59th anniversary of Israel's Declaration of Independence. For Palestinians, it's known as the Nakba, or catastrophe, which led hundreds of thousands to flee and seek refuge in neighboring countries. Several million have yet to find a permanent home. The United Nations estimates that more than 700,000 Palestinians were displaced in 1948. The organization set up an agency to register and shelter these refugees, and by 1950 the number registered was approaching 1 million. Today the UN Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, says that the total is now about 4.4 million, with another 1.5 million thought to be unregistered. Jordan is host to the largest Palestinian refugee population, almost 1.8 million. By comparison, about 1.6 million live in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and Syria and Lebanon host about 400,000 each. Now don't forget, you can reach us at the numbers at the bottom of your screen to contribute your questions and comments. Today we speak with the Commissioner-General of UNRWA, AbuZayd, about the conditions of the refugees, what lies ahead for them, and how her agency is coping with the escalating violence in Gaza. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I have to start off by asking you, considering how bad things have got in Gaza, how are you coping now that it's literally the Palestinians against the Palestinians?
That's what it was the last couple of days and earlier this year. Today, again, though, there have been a number of Israeli airstrikes, so we have that problem as well. So it's difficult for the people to cope. That's certainly true. And as an agency, as UNRWA, it's hard for our staff to be there and to move around and to stay there. And it's very worrying, the security situation.
How are you able to function with those conditions? I mean, you have snipers, you have all kinds of issues.
Yes, well, we're not the targets, no. So they're fighting among themselves actually when it's the inter-Palestinian faction. But we also, we have 9,000 staff, local staff, Palestinian refugees themselves in Gaza, another 5,000 in West Bank. So these are people who've worked with the agency for years and years, and are very good to be able to do that and to carry on the work very much.
What about, when a population like the Palestinians in Gaza and places like that are paralyzed, when they're stuck in their homes, how are you able to deal with the getting them the kind of relief they need when basically the delivery of public services are suspended?
Well, our services haven't been suspended because we've been able to carry on. We haven't been boycotted by the international community as the Palestinian Authority has been for the past year. So we've been able to carry on with our schools and our clinics and so on. Of course, the European Union set up its temporary international mechanism to help the Palestinian services carry on. So the services are limited, more limited than they were in the past, but they are still there.
What are your main concerns for the refugees right now? Is it a case of security?
Security is a problem. A bigger problem, however, is the economic difficulties, the complete collapse of the economy. But I'd say what's even worse for the Palestinians and all of them is the occupation itself, the lack of hope for the future.
Go on, yeah, I know. You have something in your ear as well. Please carry on, though. Yeah.
Yes, it's that they have no hope for the future. That they're worried not about security, about economy. These are things all linked, but they're worried more about their children and the future because they haven't seen any change over 59 years.
Now, I was reading, and it's quite appalling, but that about a quarter of Palestinian children are suffering from acute and chronic malnutrition. That conditions that bad for the Palestinians. I mean, is that a long-term issue or is it the short-term one?
No, not acute and chronic. There's people are food insecure and they're on the verge of having malnutrition, but there aren't really malnutrition problems because
perhaps
we bring in
a
lot of food. World Food Program brings in a lot of food for the non-refugees, so that's not the actual problem. There's a lot of anemia. This is a chronic problem that's in the area. Yes.
Yeah, I was reading that too as well. The hidden hunger, the micronutrient malnutrition. Right. Now, what kind of impact is that having on the development of the next generation, or the younger kids certainly who are most affected?
Well, there are of course some problems like stunting and growth problems, these sorts of things. If you just think of all of the people. 2/3 of the people, both in Gaza and West Bank, have been on food rations for 7 years almost now. And our food rations, it's fine nutritionally, but it's not great. It's just flour and lentils and oil and milk powder. I don't think you can go on like that for too long.
Are you seeing any impact on the development of the kids and so on? I mean, are you seeing any impact on the sort of actual physical development, mental development of children?
Not so much from the food problem or the nutrition problem, but more from the conflict,
Right.
the psychological problem, the trauma of the Intifada and all of the conflict they heard and saw every night. It disturbs their education, it disturbs their mental state, certainly. So a lot of psychosocial problems, yes, we are seeing.
How, when you have that issue, when you have a psyche of generations being changed, how, when you're trying to provide relief, you're trying to create some kind of normalcy, how are you able to cope with the psychological issues, as you've mentioned?
Well, we've all set up psychosocial programs, so community mental health programs, which we found are not just for the children, but for the parents as well, very much for the fathers who have been out of work since the year 2000, can't support their families, the mothers and the old people, everyone is affected. And so we have to do a lot of extra programming. We do some, for example, this summer we're trying to have a whole summer worth of summer games so that they're not, children have somewhere to go, not just for a week or two for a summer camp, but that they're really occupied, learning things, having some fun, having something else in their lives besides the misery of every day. And
I understand with the way the work conditions are, the lack of employment and so on, that you can have one person who's employed and having to try and cover a number of relatives, quite a few people under their sort of responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what we find. Our own staff are supporting not just their extended families, but their neighbors, other people they know. Everybody is stretched really to the limit. Huh?
Now, when it comes to at least looking at where the future is going, how optimistic can you remain? If just to quote the UN Resolution 194, dated from back in December 1948, it says the refugees wishing to return to their homes and live at peace with their neighbours should be permitted to do so at the earliest practicable date, and compensation should be paid for the property of those choosing not to return. Now, we're talking 1948 when that was said.
Yes, yes. Well, that's part of the hopelessness, not just the conflict that's going on now, but what's this political horizon, which seems to be the language right now. When will there be some final status issues solved, especially the refugee one, which is the one that concerns us most, but which throughout various peace negotiations seems often to have been put aside, marginalized, and left till the end with some of the other more difficult issues like Jerusalem and the borders and so on.
Do you seem to remain reasonably optimistic, maybe, that something could be done in the long term? Do you feel optimistic there's a long-term solution?
Well, long term, yes, but I think it's been a very long time already. And I think living in Gaza, living under occupation, it's hard to remain optimistic, and especially when you're living with people who are so disadvantaged and so distressed, really.
In terms of getting the international community more aware, do you feel, obviously you see it from the inside, and as much as we can in television, we certainly try to portray some of it. To what extent is the general public outside, the world audience, really aware of what life is like inside a place like Gaza, for example?
Well, I'm not sure they really are. I think they read a lot. There's plenty of news coverage. I think there was a group of excellent journalists in Gaza or in the West Bank and who come and go and report quite well and feature stories that tell you what life is like. But I think people, maybe their eyes glaze over after all these years of these stories, and that they can't really feel it and see what it means to people to be closed in, enclosed, not able to move, no freedom of movement, no access to going outside.
We have a caller on the line. Ivor is in Pakistan with a question. Go ahead. You can hear us.
Well, Mr. Rizwan, I would like to ask you and Madam AbuZayd a question which often comes to my mind. And the question is that for how long can a person be called a refugee? Now, it has been almost 1 year, 59 years since Israel was formed, and most of the Israelis were born after that time, and so they were born in that land, and so they have a right to that land. And most of the Palestinians are
right. Let's put that to Karen AbuZayd. Interesting question we got there from Pakistan. Basically, being asked how long can you call a person a refugee? And the example being given is when there have been children born in Israel from over a period of nearly 6 decades. Of course, they feel a sense of entitlement.
Mm-hmm. Well, a person is a refugee until the root cause of the whole refugee problem is solved, until there's a political solution, and that's what we're waiting for, that the political actors act. and give the refugees a choice about their future. So this is true of refugees everywhere, and I'd like to make that very clear, because sometimes people say, oh, only the Palestinians' descendants are refugees. That's not true. Any group of refugees, until they can go home, or until they're resettled, or until they decide to integrate or take another nationality, they remain refugees. Their descendants remain refugees.
Indefinitely.
Indefinitely, yes.
Obviously, our emails feature some fairly strong emotions. People feel very strongly about this subject. And I have one couple of questions I wanted to put to you that came by email. One was from Omar Fahd in Amman, here in Jordan. And Omar says, the real Palestinian cause is the cause of the refugees, and judging by the everlasting Israeli stance on this cause, any negotiations that will not embrace a total and just solution to the issue of the refugees will never see the light. So there's a sense that this is really very much the core, and people feel very strongly about that. Is there that same sense within the Palestinian areas as well?
Oh, I'd say so, very definitely. And I think what's worrying people also now is the attempt by many in the international community, or some in the international community, to deviate from this. I think King Abdullah here has made it quite clear quite recently that this is the core problem, and we were very glad to hear him say that, because we hear some of our neighboring countries saying, no, there are bigger problems, there are different problems, you know, the Palestinian problem's been around a long time, we can put that aside for a while, or it will solve itself one day. Otherwise, we need to look at other things further afield within the region even.
Well, another email that came from Anton Garu says, those people are still in the camps because the leaders of the Arab world won't let them out. It's easy to blame Israel for everything, but much Palestinian suffering can be laid at the feet of both Palestinian and other Arab leaders who keep people in the camps in the name of keeping the flame of hate for Israel burning, saying that really this is used as an excuse. How do you feel about that?
I think that's entirely inaccurate. In the first place, only 1/3 of all the 4 million refugees live in camps. 2/3 of the people don't. They move out if they can. So people aren't kept in camps. Those who stay in camps try to improve their conditions inside the camps, and it's not an excuse at all. It doesn't, you know, people will have the choice to make whether they're in a camp or outside a camp. So refugees won't go away because there are no camps.
For those young people born into a life in another country, those who are displaced effectively, you know, how can you sort of judge how they might react if they're given a chance to go back? How likely is it that they would want to uproot when they feel so entrenched, perhaps, in a new country or another place, you know?
Yes. I'm not sure they feel entrenched. In some places, perhaps a little more so than others. For example, in Jordan, where they have citizenship, many of them. Also in Syria, where they're treated very well, where they have not passports, but they have all other privileges of citizenship. But I think the first thing any refugee will tell you, that he remains a refugee until he is given that choice. And
even the younger generations?
Oh yes, in fact sometimes more strongly even than their parents, I would say, because it's the parents who have settled and perhaps have a home and a job and so on, but the young people are still dreaming and thinking about Palestine.
Probably a sensitive question, but the Palestinian population has grown rapidly, and especially we see how crowded places like Gaza are.
Because it's a small place.
Well, it's a small place, of course, but as the population grows quickly, I don't know, is it a sensitive topic when you talk about issues that might affect other places, you know, talk about family planning and so on? Can those even be broached?
Oh yes, no, in fact UNRWA has quite a strong family planning program. It's done quite a good job of bringing down the birth rates in the region, and of course something like the Intifada interferes with this and brings the birth rate back up again. But no, these are people understand these things.
Considering your agency, UNRWA, actually, you know, it's a bigger employer than the Palestinian Authority. Considering,
no.
Doesn't it effectively with all the various people you take on board? Is it not comparable?
It's big, but we have only a few of the public services. We provide education, health, social services, not all the other things that a government does, that the Palestinian Authority does.
What sort of stress does that put on you? Well, maybe perhaps in the Palestinian Authority in those areas. What sort of stress does that put on you financially as an agency?
Well, the real financial stress are maybe twofold right now. First, the increase in the population every year, which means our budget must grow every year. We need more teachers every year. The other thing is the length of the problem, which means that we have 50-year-old camps and 50-year-old homes, and all of these things at this time, they need improvement, and we really need to have more infrastructure help and to be able to build more schools, so that most of our schools are double shifted now, for example, and we need to reclaim our former standards of excellence that we had in the 50s, 60s, and even 70s.
Do you feel a sense of support, true support from the international community for the agency?
Oh, I think there's very definite true support for the Palestinian refugees and through us for them. But the question is how much can it increase every year, and how much more can we get from them in order to do some of these additional things that we need to do besides just this basic primary health care and primary education.
Let's squeeze in with about a minute to go. Glenn is on the line from Israel. Glenn, what would you like to ask?
Yes, hi, Riz. My question was regarding the question asked just a few moments ago about not the Arab governments not taking the responsibility of the Palestinian refugees. I know that only 1/4 of them are actually in camps, but none of them are allowed citizenship in countries. And there was a long list of refugees from many wars and in the past where people resettled in other countries. They became citizens. So, in a certain sense,
Right.
I do blame the Arab government, and I'd like to know what your guest has to say about
Glenn?
that.
Thank you, Glenn. Glenn's just a very quick answer for this, please, Karen. Glenn's saying that he agrees that, you know, that with the email that came, that this Arab government is often to blame because many other refugees in other situations are given citizenship, whereas Arab governments may give passports but not specifically citizenship.
Well, the Jordanian government has given citizenship, but that doesn't take away the refugeehood. The refugee status remains, so that it's not an issue. It's not the issue.
So it's an overriding as opposed to a more direct one.
That's right.
Well, Karen AbuZayd, thank you very much for joining us, and thanks for discussing this subject with us.
Thank you very
Pleasure to
much
have you
for
with us.
this opportunity.
Thank you. Well, thank you for being with us too. Next week, Anna Naidu is going to be filling in for me from Washington, D.C. So don't forget, if you have any thoughts about pressing issues around the world, we'd like you to send your emails. You send them to riz@aljazeera.net. We'll see you soon for that. And remember, Street Talk, coming to you from Amman, is right next.